Assassin's Creed is a series that means a lot to me. I've played through a lot of these games countless times, dived deep into the lore, and obsessed over and over on them. With the announcement of the future of Assassin's Creed being Assassin's Creed Infinity, which I have no interest in playing, to culminate my experience with AC with Valhalla, I thought I'd make a ranking of the series, how I feel about them, at least at the moment. These will be going from worst to best, and also this will have spoilers for the entire series. I just want to say that this is my personal ranking of the series, it's just my opinion, and that with 12 full games in the series, there's going to be a huge variety in what people's rankings would be. So with that said, let's get into it. Coming in firmly at last place is Assassin's Creed Odyssey. This is very clearly my least favourite for two distinct reasons. The first being that it's barely an AC game. The assassin and hidden ones are not present at all, as they don't exist yet. There's no hidden blade, and the game does not fit with the established rule of the series. Giving either Cassandra or Alexios superpowers and a magical spearhead weapon completely contradicts the foundation of this series, being a realistic, grounded experience with sci-fi elements thrown in, but mostly to explore the Assassins v Templars and their fight of ideology across the centuries, which is either not or barely present at Odyssey at all. The second is that Odyssey tried to push the series into a more hardcore RPG direction, but it's just not a very good one. The crux to an RPG is choice and consequence. The issue is that the choices in this game have very little consequences. Who you choose in Athens v Sparta is irrelevant and makes no difference throughout the entirety of the game. Who you choose with Alexios or Cassandra makes no difference and is irrelevant throughout the entire game. As well as the main story, it's a Greek family tragedy, and throughout the game, you choose who of your family members you let live, and the only consequences to any of this is who shows up at a family dinner cutscene at the end of the game. These choices have no lasting impact on the world, the story, or the main character. As well as whoever you pick, Cassandra or Alexios is an inconsistent character. They try to give them a backstory with personality of a traditional Assassin's Creed protagonist, but then give you options of an RPG like Skyrim to say and make choices whichever direction you want, which contradicts the established personality of that protagonist. I like the idea of using these further back in time periods, before Hidden Ones and before Assassins, to dive deeper into the issue and the lore of linking that with a lot of mythology in a sci-fi way. I just really think Odyssey didn't understand the AC lore and went about it in completely the wrong way. A couple of smaller things too. I really don't like how spongy the combat is. I don't like the cut and paste nature of a lot of the open world content such as bandit camps. Odyssey is a very beautiful game. The creation of ancient Greece is visually very vibrant and interesting. I like the ship used to navigate the islands, and I think some of the storylines in certain regions are quite well written. But I think overall, the main story is not worth paying much attention to, and the game requires far too many hours to get through. Odyssey is as wide and beautiful as an ocean, but as deep and murky as a puddle. Coming in at 11th is Syndicate. Both Odyssey and Syndicate are the only two games made by Ubisoft Quebec, and where in Odyssey I felt they did their best to ignore the Assassin's Creed aspect, in Syndicate they did their best to make fun of it. I've thought for a while Syndicate represented a jumping off point for the series. Not in gameplay, that would come in Origins, but in tone, story and marketing. It seems clear that after Unity, Ubisoft seemed to think Assassins weren't marketable enough, and had to introduce a new gimmick into each game. And in Syndicate, it was 1800s London gangster, and the whole implementation of the gang system just feels like a gimmick. I really dislike Syndicate for another key reason. It doesn't take itself seriously at all. AC always has, and Syndicate is a shocking departure. Jacob cracking jokes while saving children from child labour factories with upbeat music playing just feels so out of place in this setting and in this series. I also dislike both main characters. I think Evie is significantly better than Jacob, who just comes off obnoxious, but these characters are very one note and almost solely defined by one line that they repeat throughout the game. Evie's is,
"Find the piece of Eden!"
and Jacob's is,
"The rooks!"
Jacob's almost solely obsessed with his gang, and Evie with the piece of Eden, but it's never really explained why, other than that's really just what assassins do. I think the London in this game though is fantastic. The level of scale they had to jump from previous AC was enormous, and I think they pulled it off very well. There's almost a historical GTA level type gameplay with the carriages, and I thought that was really neat. The main issue with London is that its traversal is not engaging due to the rope launcher, but more importantly the parkour system. Downgrade, mostly from the lack of being able to jump properly. I also think the combat here is way too spongy, and the story is probably the least I've been engaged with in the whole series. Crawford Starrick is a very forgettable villain, and the District Freedom system is the most bland I've seen in a Ubisoft game. At number 10, we have Rogue. Rogue is a game that was in the shadow of Unity, launching on the same day, only on previous gen platforms. And because of that, it was a while before I got around to playing it, but once I did, I was both pleasantly surprised and disappointed. I enjoyed the fact it felt like Black Flag DLC, as that game was very good, and exploring North America during the 7 Years' War was very interesting. The main issue with Rogue is Shay, as I think his reason for leaving the Assassins and joining the Templars was flimsy at best. Other AC games, particularly 1 and 3, did a great job at representing the shades of grey between both sides, and I feel as though a game is where you play as a Templar, the traditional bad guys in nearly every other AC game, well, that needs to be well done, and I just don't feel like it was. I like learning a lot more about other characters. The origins of Achilles and the demise of Adewale was good to see, but I just really think Rogue is mostly a forgettable experience, and it certainly feels like a side game and not a mainline story. At number 9, we have Assassin's Creed 3. Assassin's Creed 3 was probably the most hyped I've ever been for an AC game. I remember watching the trailers endlessly and the sense of finale that this game was bringing with it. Of course we knew the series would continue, but the culmination of this game would bring the existing modern day story was exciting. I, like a lot of AC fans, was significantly let down by this game. Firstly, in the gameplay aspect, getting to parkour through nature was a good addition and made a lot of sense considering Connor's upbringing and environment, but it's very clear the colonial American cities, New York and Boston, were not suitable for parkour compared to the Middle Eastern and European cities. The wide roads, the steep roof lines, the grid structure hamstrung the parkour system, as well as the staggering effect when attempting to jump to a not clearly defined landing zone ruined all momentum the player would have. The other thing that let me down was the character of Connor. I appreciate we needed someone different from Ezio, but after having Ezio, a beloved character, and played through whole 3 games, Connor had a lot to live up to, and it just feels like they didn't even try. It feels like Connor had next to no character development, being constantly shown that what he was doing and the people he was siding with was hurting his cause to help his village. He staunchly ignores everyone, and it feels like Connor never actually cared about the Assassins or the Creed. Also, Connor being almost the sole reason why so many important revolutionary battles were won felt more than a bit ridiculous. Hytham is often cited as a more intriguing character than Connor, and I think that's fair, especially since we play as him for the first few hours. I think the family dynamic of father v son and Templar v assassin, and each man's respective journey to get there. I also liked the shades of grey they introduced after the Ezio trilogy was mostly black and white between good and bad for the Assassins versus Templars. The truth is the world is more complicated than that. I appreciate 3 trying to incorporate that even if it didn't succeed all that well. And lastly, the ending was a huge issue in this game. Killing Desmond, I understand why it had to be done logistically, as every character throughout different time periods couldn't always be his ancestor. But I think immediately after 4, playing another his ancestor and having no immediate alternative to him really hurt this ending, as well as the whole reason why he died felt just confusing and extremely unsatisfying. At number 8, we have Valhalla. If you want to hear my in-depth thoughts of Valhalla, I have a video about Valhalla as a game and its place within the franchise. But to summarize my thoughts, Valhalla is a very confused game. As it's largely centered around the Viking conquest of England, each region having different stories that are almost completely unrelated, I feel significantly hurt this game. As in the end, it's all just to help the settlement. And the issue is, the game gives very little reason for the player to care about the settlement, other than Eivor does, so you, the player, should too. Secondly, as an AC game, it has a lot of great AC elements. Having a Hidden Ones bureau, marking off order of ancient targets, the cities, the abandoned Hidden Ones bureaus, the modern day linking heavily to the issue and the events of Valhalla. There's really great stuff in here. The main issue is Ava, our main protagonist, doesn't care about any of it. At 7, we have Assassin's Creed Unity. I think Unity is the best AC game that never was. Unity so clearly needed more time in development, as it's on its way to being the best AC game, but stops short in almost every department. The parkour is flashy, full of great animation, and has introduced a lot of elements, such as parkour down. Paris is the most beautiful city created in all of games, and it's perfect built for parkour system. It's just let down by not having as much player control as AC1 to the Ezio trilogy. Making a wrong move traversing Paris makes Arno constantly stagger, ruining player momentum. The stealth system was greatly overhauled, making a bunch of tools such as hidden blade arrows, smoke bombs, and most importantly crouching, making stealth through indoor areas much more dynamic. It's brought down by horrible enemy AI, constantly being seen through objects and smoke, making encounters turn to combat. Combat in this game evolves the traditional AC style of counter moves, but makes it significantly harder, forcing the player to rely on stealth more. As once too many enemies are around, combat becomes incredibly tough. Arno can't easily clear a room full of guards as previous games could. The main thing holding Unity back though is its story and characters. The Arno and Elise dynamic is really great in theory, but not so much in execution, as these characters are again solely focused on their objective. Arno is completely obsessed with Elise, even when she treats him horribly, and Elise is solely focused on revenge for her father. Neither of these characters grow throughout the events until the very end where Elise dies. We only see this growth of Arno through the DLC Dead Kings. Also, Germain is a confusing and poorly explained villain. The plot has significant issues of just throwing revolutionary happenings in, such as Louis' execution and Robespierre suddenly being a Templar out of nowhere with little explanation. In terms of smaller things, Paris is filled with amazing side content, from the multiplayer co-op missions to the murder mysteries and the cafe missions. But the issue is, the game never naturally tells you about any of this or encourages to explore it. I also dislike Unity's menu system. I don't understand why buying robes or the colours for them in this game, all you do is hit pause instead of actually going through the city and finding a tailor, or to get new weapons or upgrade them, not just to go to a blacksmith. It would have created a more dynamic feeling within Paris and encouraged exploration. Also, using English accents instead of French just completely ruins the immersion of the experience for me. Unity, more than anything, needed more time in development, not just to iron out the bugs and glitches that plagued the launch, but to further develop and push the story, characters, and features that are all going in the right direction but haven't reached their destination. Honestly, Rogue should have released as the only mainline, cross-gen AC game in 2014, and pushed Unity to a 2015 release. At number 6, we have Where It All Began, the first Assassin's Creed. I feel this game suffers a lot of criticism of being dated, which it very much is. Parkour and inputs aren't as responsive, the mission design is incredibly repetitive, and listening to Al Mualim blab on for ages between them gets very tiresome. AC1 pioneered a lot of the aspects that were popular throughout the rest of the series, and I feel like it does some of these things actually the best. The sense of mystery around the modern day and how it links to the past is its absolute pinnacle here. The ending shot of the spinning globe centuries before many of these places had been mapped was mind-blowing. The exploration of the Assassins v Templar ideals here is at its best too. We see the Assassins as this rigid organisation, held out in a castle obsessed with rules and structure, with the Templar as their lead. Many of the Templar targets in their confessions have noble goals attempting to help the people of these cities. It's this aspect above all I'd love to see return to the franchise. Now into the top 5, and at number 5 we have Black Flag. Black Flag is a bit of a confusing game for me. I love the stories and characters of this game. I'd say it's without a doubt the best written game in the whole franchise. I love the Caribbean environment, exploration of the island and tropical coast. as well as the exploration of what the Assassins and the Templars are from an outsider, and a pirate no less, is absolutely phenomenal. Having Edward go on a journey and decide to join the Assassins out of belief for what they do and what they represent is my favourite aspect, as most AC protagonists join due to heritage or as a way to serve their other motives. I think this game pioneered a lot for AC and for Ubisoft, with the open world activities being bountiful in crafting, sea diving, taking down ships and Templars. But I have one very significant issue with this game. I've never liked the ship mechanics in AC. They're an absolute fan favourite that Ubisoft have been attempting to turn into its own franchise with Skull and Bones, but I've never found it engaging. When it's used for traversal around the ocean and a bit of light combat, I don't mind, but I hate having to use the ships in big naval battles or through significant story missions. At number 4, we have Assassin's Creed Revelations. Capping off the Ezio games, Revelations, we get to explore a new side to Ezio in a new environment away from Italy. I love the Altair aspects of this game, and Ezio finding Altair's skeleton in Masyaf Castle is still the absolute best moment in the series for me. It beautifully culminates both Altair's story as a reformer of the Assassins and what the Creed means, but also captures Ezio's life journey, fighting for this cause he has lost faith in, trying to understand its purpose and eventually fulfilling it by talking directly to Desmond. It is only through having multiple games as Ezio that we can have development and moments like this, and I'd love to see direct sequels playing as the same protagonist return, as characters such as Arno and Edward deserve it, but mostly Bayek. Things can't all be good though, as I think the whole main story with the Sultan and the Prince to be fairly forgettable in comparison. And I think the game feels very much like a reskinned Brotherhood, which isn't bad, but it doesn't stand on its own 2 feet on a gameplay level, with the only real new mechanics being the hook blade and bomb crafting. At number 3, we have Assassin's Creed Origins. From this list, I feel this game is a bit out of place. I'm mainly a classic AC fan, with I think the RPG games missing out a lot of what AC what it is. But Origins is the exception to this rule. Bayek carries this game on his back, a fantastically written character with a performance even better. You feel the emotions Boubacar Salim is displaying through the character, and it's a shame that Bayek only had one game to explore this. Other than Bayek, I feel Ancient Egypt is probably the best open world Ubisoft have made. Egypt drips atmosphere, and I had to spend hours just in this location. It's dynamic and varied too, whether the wealthy streets and buildings of Alexandria, the weeds of the Nile, the harsh deserts, the huge mountains, or the Roman areas of Cyrene, there's so much in Egypt worth exploring. It also has my favourite combat in the series. It's far from perfect, but I personally find it more engaging than the counter system from all previous games, and I think it shines the most in Curse of the Pharaohs DLC. On the other hand though, it started the new parkour system, which is not nearly as engaging, as I feel like the cities are not built for parkour at all, and you climb up walls like you're Spider-Man. This game is far from perfect though, as I think the story loses a lot of momentum halfway through and gives an unsatisfying origin to the Brotherhood. Even with that though, there are great origin moments, such as the origin of the Leap of Faith, the cutting of the ring finger for the hidden blade, and the assassin insignia, that all give a much more emotional impact to these aspects throughout the entire rest of the series. The side content is admittedly not very strong. Lots of fetch quests and similar interactions, rewards being monetary for Bayek and XP. There are some strong ones though, as I feel the Constellation and it teaching about Bayek's relationships with Kemu to always be a highlight of the game. Origins is far from the best games of the series, with tons of flaws and a lot of Ubisoft bloat, but it's just a game that I love nonetheless. At number 2, we have Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Brotherhood built on the best aspects of 2 and also pioneered the one city location and district system. Going through the districts of Rome and helping them recruiting members to your cause is the best it's ever been, as it's in Brotherhood. I also love the introduction of the Brotherhood mechanic, recruiting assassins, upgrading them, and them helping you. It was very unbalanced, and the way to recruit assassins was very similar, but I love the idea and would love to see a new version of this return. The best part about Brotherhood though is the development of Ezio. Having him become a master assassin and mentor of the Brotherhood feels so earned, seeing this boy from 2 initially want revenge for the murder of his family, to be surrounded by the friends he made, leading them to fight for their common cause. At number 1, my favourite AC game has to be Assassin's Creed 2. It's my favourite AC game for a lot of reasons. I love the environments of Florence and Venice. I love where it took the series in both the modern day, moving from Abstergo to the modern day assassins, but most of all, I loved experiencing Ezio's life, from before he was an assassin to learning to become one, to his own goals and eventually learning why the assassins are important and why they and him are needed. And nothing beats the ending to AC2, fist fighting the Pope under the Vatican, only for Minerva to appear, turn to the camera and speak directly to Desmond. AC2 also introduced us to such a fantastic cast of supporting characters: Mario, La Volpe, Leonardo da Vinci, Claudia, Paula, Caterina Sforza. The game also significantly improved gameplay. Parkour was much more concise, and the ability to reach added a lot of versatility. Adding more tools to be used in combat, such as different weapon types, hidden blades, spears, and more, as well as telling a much more personal narrative and experiencing the assassins as an underground organisation behind the scenes. It also evolved the range of side activities. Upgrading the villa was addicting. Going to merchants such as tailors and blacksmiths made the cities feel more real. Needing to find all the codex pages to finish the stories. And, most importantly, the assassin tombs to get the seals to finally obtain the armour of Altair. It's still not been topped in any other AC game. And speaking of Altair, this game perfectly presents as a sequel while not playing as the same protagonist. Altair is felt and experienced throughout the game as both Desmond and Ezio, even though he is only playable in a very small section. It's how future games should look to incorporate past assassins. I think this game will always be one of my favourites of all time. At the end of the day, it's just a narrative and world that spoke to me personally, and it's the game that made me fall in love with Assassin's Creed. Well, there you go. There's the entire Assassin's Creed franchise ranked, and my reasons for them. Let me know what your ranking of them are in the comments. If you like this video, consider leaving a like, and if you want to see more, consider subscribing. Till next time, cheers and have a good one.